My name is Joshua Moponga, son of Marara, brought up as an Adventist minister, the Seventh Adventist Church, trained in Solusi. Our greater tribe of the Soshe finds its roots in the greater nations of the Mwenimtapa, the sons of Tovera and Mrenga. The message of the hour is not only for the Christian community. We extend ourselves beyond Christianity to Islam, to the African nation at large. There has been lots of discussion and talk around who am I and what am I doing. I'm fully brought up in the Christian space, trained, worked, and developed. So I have a full understanding of the Christian community, which has the Bible as its basis. I've had my further studies into the Hebraic literature, which has the Torah as its basics. I've had some readings into Islam. I've had some extensive studies into African religions. But when conflict like this and controversy, challenges and problems of our times come, it is too late to begin to look at each other in terms of denominational, occupational, and academic differences. The problem unites us together as wealth has separated us. In the midst of all the catastrophe of our times that we are living in, one will be naive to say this problem is only targeted at one group of people less than the other. There's been a lot of conspiracy theories. There's been a lot of conversations around the greater space of the coronavirus that has hit the world over. Some say it is a Chinese disease. Some say it is an American weapons of mass destruction. Some say it is Bill Gates trying to vaccinate the world. Some say it is actually a pandemic that has been happening every 100 years, if you can trace your history. I'm not here to qualify, approve, or rather can I state that I'm not here to stand in justification of any. But the reality is we are in trouble and we are facing a catastrophe of a universal nature. Many people have argued with me, asking me, why do I constantly seem like I'm confused between the two pillars of understanding, African traditional wisdom and knowledge, and the European-based Eurocentric Christianity, which I have professed and lived so long. There's no doubt in my mind that in the midst of growth, from a size 2 pair of shoes, you've grown to a size 5, size 6, size 7. If you're like me, you're now on a size 10. In as much as I once fitted in the size 2 and size 3 shoes, it will be totally obnoxious, if not bordering on the sense of madness, to force me to fit into the same shoes that I put on as a young child. Faith must be kept constant, but education must never be constant. Learning, breaking boundaries of knowledge must be a desire of every one of us. I look at the biblical text from a slightly different perspective than many of you have. Many people face into the Bible and look into the text because they are looking for doctrine. They are looking for dogma. They are looking for do this and don't do that. But actually, the text has not been built around the do's and don'ts. The text has been built around a personal relationship, which I want to term not spiritualists, but I want to call that spirituality. Spirituality is different from spiritualists. For spirituality speaks of your personal connection with the waters above and the waters within, the land below and the land within, the air around you and the air that is within you. The creation of God for mankind, therefore, cannot be restricted to denominational and religious corridors. Having said that, I read through the text, not looking only for dogma, but looking for relevance, even for our time. And as we are facing this universal problem, the coronavirus, COVID-19, I would want to find my mind lingering around the passage found in the book of Daniel, chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5 introduces us to a party, a world party, For when Babylon was in power, ruling the world, all the vassal states from Jerusalem, Israel, and beyond, Greek and Roman, were all subject to Babylon. And at the pinnacle of the Babylon Empire, Belshazzar decides to call a party. And this party is located somewhere in his royal residence, where he calls all the powerful people of his nation. What do I mean by all? I mean economic gurus, magicians, astrologers, necromancers, entertainment industry. Everybody who is who in the Babylonian Empire was invited for this party. Will I be wrong to say that at the pinnacle of this world civilization, people are meeting and grouping in groups, discussing and having fun and playing and talking? Our nation has been intoxicated with entertainment instead of education. People sit around wanting to enjoy themselves. I've heard of the World Cup soccer matches. I've heard of the Olympics games. I've heard of the Cricket World Cup champions. I've heard of the Rugby Cup champions, Chess Cup champions, Snooker Cup champions, all other champions around the world. But when this disaster falls upon the earth, it brings everything to a standstill. I love something about that passage. In the midst of the party that was invited, then the Bible says people began to enjoy themselves in intoxication, that is in drinking of alcohol. They began to enjoy themselves in terms of pleasure. Parties were running. If it was in modern days, then the lights were on, the blue and red and neon lights were flashing on the dance floor as Belshazzar was drinking wine in front of his concubines and in front of his wives. The world civilization has not found itself exempted. We have found ourselves in soccer stadiums in thousands, 60, 70, 80, 120,000 people, watching people kicking a skin of a dead ox. People sitting and gathering, burning themselves in the sun, watching cricket. Buckets and cooler boxes, time out, playing with other children. But this time, and this virus comes around, there's no more time to play with other children. Go home and play with your own children. This catastrophe finds us totally absorbed, intoxicated with entertainment. And in the midst of such rivalry, debauchery, licentiousness that fills our land, in the midst of the party that seemed to have been going very well with all guests present, all wine present, then Belshazzar says, please, can you go and collect for me some of the vessels from the temple? Those ones that were brought from the house of Judah, those that were brought from Jerusalem, let me also drink wine in them. You must always be careful that in the midst of so much rivalry and entertainment and pleasure, that you don't begin to tamper with religious issues. For religious issues are not part of entertainment. I know many of our churches have become entertainment centers. For people who are stressed and distressed, they come here for a word of encouragement and a small little word that can give them enough motivation to drive here to another week. And many of us are on the drug called church drug, where we go here, we drink, we sniff this drug, given a little bit of hope. God is on our side. It's your year 2010, everything will be positive. It's your year 2012, everything. It's your year 2013. Even in 2020, I saw declarations that 2020 represents equalization. Everything will be perfect. The prophets of doom and the prophets of peace have come trying to tell us that there's peace and there's peace in the world, when in fact now we have realized hardly 3 months into the year that the peace they spoke about is not yet materialized into anything that we call peace. Now here we are, locked down in our houses, and we cannot move any inch away from our doorsteps. As Belshazzar had called a party, the world politicians have called United Nations, World Council of Churches. They've called up the African unions, SADC unions, COMESA unions, European unions, BRICS unions. And all these unions are men gathering together, discussing the politics and the direction of the world. As they sat in Belshazzar's palace, all of them present, they thought they were celebrating their civilization until in the midst of the civilization, until in the midst of the celebration, until in the midst of their entertainment and pleasure, until in the midst of their spiritual adultery and mixing wines and drinks, celebrating with their concubines. Then the Black Book tells us there was the writing on the wall. The finger of the omnipotent one walks into an uninvited party and he writes on the wall. Is it not true that all our transport, aviation, sea, rail, roads are proved to be inefficient to deal with the catastrophe at hand? God does not need an invitation into the affairs of men. The universe does not need an invitation into the foolishness of men's intelligence. When the universe has something, when God has something, when Yahweh has something, whoever you call him, God, Nkulunkulu, Mbelinganda, when he has something that he wants to communicate with the people, he does not seek for their permission. When doors are closed and all the guests are inside, we seem to find the omnipotent one sneaking in through the corridors of time, through the spaces, the vector and scalar quantities, through the opaque and the transparent materials, appearing and writing on the wall. And the writing in our time in 2020 is on the wall. The intelligence of man, the technologies of man, the civilization of man has been proved but to be nothing, useless, and worthless. The writing was simple. Mene tekel opasin, or mene tekel pasin. Simply meaning counted. Weighed, found wanting. Follow closely. The accuracy of heaven cannot be misunderstood. He does not count. He does not weigh. If you don't know the Hebraic concept of thinking, you might actually miss it altogether. Why would the writing of Yahweh be duplicated? Mene, tekel, pasin. Translated, weighed, counted, found wanting. See, this concept of the Hebraic school of thought seems to explain to us that when divinity looks at your case, it's not just once. We weigh. No, maybe I made a mistake. Let me weigh again. No, I counted. Maybe I didn't count enough. Let me count again. This duplicate function in the Hebraic and the Torahic teaching tells us that there's accuracy. I grew up as a shepherd boy. I know what it means when you come back home and my grandfather will say you cannot lock the gates of the kraal before you have counted the cattle. There you are beginning to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. My grandfather at one time had 120 cattle, and you know how much time that would take us. You need to take a stick and count one, and you're busy pushing them on the side. And then you find 2 are missing. You cannot just start running away from the kraal. You must go back again and start counting again and start counting again. If you cannot trust yourself, call someone else and say, let's count this thing and make sure it's sure. And for sure, after 2, 3, 4 counts, you discover that 2 cattle are missing. Therefore, the concept of counted, it says you count the first time for yourself. The second time when you count, you need a witness. You need to confirm that the first information that you found is correct. So he counts and he counts again. He weighs the morality of the world and he weighs it again. He weighs the entertainment of the world and he weighs it again. He weighs the economics of the world and he weighs it again. He weighs the poverty of the world. He weighs it again. He weighs the family structures of the world. He weighs them again. He weighs the governance of the systems and he weighs them again. He weighs the food of the world. He weighs them again. This concept of doing it twice simply says, I want to confirm if what I have seen here is indeed what is happening on the ground. Therefore, when a testimony is given, we need 2 witnesses. Now, that's the Torahic concept of teaching. You cannot condemn anyone to death before you find 2 or 3 witnesses to the same event that you're condemning them for. When we look at the world's catastrophe right now, we have been counted. We have been counted. How many are righteous? How many are truthful? How many are honest? How many are seeking after God's face? We have been weighed to see if the weight of our dignity is anything that can sit on the scale. The Black Book gives us the shocking testimony. Weighed, Counted, found wanting. The concept of wanting, found missing. Concept of wanting, found not adequate. Concept of counting, found not having sufficient grounds to justify existence. This writing on the wall throws the whole world into a ballistic confusion. Those who seem to have solutions for medicine are locked up in the laboratories looking for the solution for the coronavirus. Politicians are making statements telling us, don't worry, don't worry. But by now, you know, when they say don't worry, it's actually a signal to say you must start worrying. For how can we not worry when we are locked up in our houses? How can we not worry when we are not free to move around the world? How can we not worry when we cannot visit our friends and have celebrations on the streets? How can we not worry when you as governments are worried? Banks, shops, malls, freeways are empty. Friends and relatives are infected and affected. As of this morning, I received a news that one of my dear favorite pastors in Bloemfontein is actually contracted coronavirus, COVID-19, close to me. I know him personally. And the government is saying, don't worry. When all of a sudden I must walk into my house, putting on some liquids on my hands, I must steam myself every day, and I must make sure that I don't greet everybody. I must start knocking everyone on the shoulder. The same shoulder I'm sneezing on, I must be touching you with it. How can I not worry? And when the writing was on the wall, the black text says, the whole hall came to a standstill, as the world today is also at a standstill. Those that are in the mountains, stay there. Those that are in the fields, stay there. Those that are in the house, stay there. Those that are on the road, stay there. Does that sound familiar for you? If you're a reader of the Bible, that there will be no movement. Let everyone stay in their own place and not move at all. And yet they say, do not worry. It almost sounds like the gospel of peace, peace, when there is no peace at all. In the midst of such catastrophe, the writing is on the wall. People can't move. The hearts of mankind are going to stop for fear. When fear grips the hearts of mankind, the old woman, Nebuchadnezzar's wife, the grandmother of Belshazzar. And by chance, by the way, if you are an academic, you want just to enjoy yourself on the biblical text and find why did Nebuchadnezzar name his grandchild Belshazzar when he also named Daniel Belshazzar? Because after working with Daniel for such a long time, he just hoped by streak of chance that the wisdom that God and Yahweh had bestowed upon Daniel Belshazzar may also be transmitted into the grandson Belshazzar. But Belshazzar had become a party animal. Belshazzar had become a cooler box animal. Belshazzar had become a sex orgy boy. Belshazzar had become a collector of concubines. Belshazzar had become a desecrator of holy places. And the grandmother says, you, together with your grandfather, when God speaks, you don't listen. When God demonstrates, you don't participate. And as he treated your grandfather, who ate grass like a cow for 7 years, until he looked up to the heavens to discover that there is a God in heaven. You have not humbled yourself. The grandmother does small little devotion, waking up the boy from slumber. And all of a sudden we discover amongst all the guests that were invited, one guest had not been invited. And then we understand that there are places the children of Yahweh must not be found, where the rest of the world is meeting. Call on him, the grandmother says. He will tell you the writing that is on the wall. It's for the first time then we hear that the first passage in Daniel chapter 5 needs some justification. For the passage says, he called all. He called all. Ministers, the governors, the leaders of his nation. But we also understand in chapter 4 that when Medo-Persia came into power, Daniel was appointed as one of the leaders of the kingdom. Same with Babylon. When Daniel interpreted the dream, he became the prime minister of the world. So how can you tell me that now you're running the peak of the Babylonian kingdom, and yet you forget your own president. You forget your own prime minister. You forget your own governor, Daniel himself, who was the kingpin of wisdom for your grandfather. But I know very well, when people are planning corruption and evil, they don't like holy people and righteous people next to them. They don't like people with wisdom, people with common sense who can challenge their status quo. I hear the world over talking about globalization, globalization. I've constantly asked, what will the African become in that global village? If not, we're going to become slaves and bear children to slavery of the economic masters. As Daniel walks into the room, his words are as loud and as clear. Like a sharp knife, hot knife cutting through butter, he does not mix or mince his word. He can tell that his father was here. He can tell that there has been a visitation from the supernatural, to which he looks into the wall and he says to him, yes, I can read that and I can interpret that. Foolishly so, Belshazzar bellows out, whoever is able to interpret this thing, whoever is able to tell me the writing on the wall, I will make him third in the kingdom. Why would you make him third in the kingdom when you are number one? Now we know that Belshazzar was not number one, for his father was still alive, who loved hunting in the greater Iran and Iraq area. So he was left to look after a kingdom, which he was not actually the rightful king. So he can only make the one who has interpreted the dream not number one, not number two, but make him number three. Why number three? Because he still wanted to remain superior to the one who had given him solutions. Is that not true? Is that not true? That you still want to classify people even after you've discovered that you cannot solve the problem. He accepts the offer. I will put my golden chain on him and I will make him the third in the kingdom. Daniel looks onto the wall and he says, Mene, mene, tekel parsin. O king and all your governors, O United Nations and all your governments and presidents, O the Queen of the Commonwealth and all your vassal states in the common poverty, all the leaders of the world and all those people that gather around you, all the IMF, all the World Council of Churches, you have been weighed. You have been weighed. You have been counted. You have been counted. You are found wanting. As for Africa and the plurality of the churches that have filled up the land with all our prophets and men of God, all the anointings put together, you have been weighed. You have been counted. You have been found wanting. Is it not even interesting to say that within 1 week, God has been able to actually give resignation letters, give retrenchment packages to all our fake pastors who have been filling up the atmosphere? Where is your man of God? Where is your prophet? They were telling us all sorts of prophecies. Where are they now? Where are the solutions? Weighed, counted, found wanting. Some of them in the midst of these problems are still sending SMSs to their members. Please send us your tithes and offerings. While they're also in hiding from the same catastrophe that is affecting their members. Weighed, counted, found wanting. After we've put so much money in building infrastructures, building monumentous, galactic cathedrals. This is where God is. And now all those buildings have been shut down. Weighed, counted, found wanting. With our pharmaceutical companies full of tablets and full of medicines, vaccine after vaccines, weighed, found wanting. The education system full of doctors and PhDs, people learning and graduating left, right, and center, magma summa cum laude, weighed, counted, found wanting. The technologies and the genius of mankind has been proved to zero. When the writing wasn't on the wall, even the kings tremble. The passage is not lack of details. It simply tells us that while the king was actually standing there, his loins gave way. What does it mean that the loins gave way? It's a polite way of telling us that he just made a toilet where he was standing. By opening up of the loins, his own intestines could not hold the debt that was in his stomach. And it's scary to find presidents, prime ministers, ambassadors, all of them having been diagnosed to have this coronavirus. How do we deal with it? They're planning to put 5Gs into the skies, destroying human civilization and destroying nature on the grounds. Birds have proved to die where this 5G radar is running. Trees have dried up. The technologies of man, because people are in a desire to rule and govern each other. The universe and God looks and says, weighed, counted, found wanting. Many of us have been running away from our own homes, and our homes have not been equally balanced. Now we are locked up in our own homes. Weighed, counted, found wanting. May I ask you a question? Now that we are locked up at home, so who is going to baptize your children? Who is going to collect the tithes and offerings? Who is going to be standing at the deaconry telling people to put on ties and jackets? Who is going to be supervising your spirituality now that you are locked up in your own house and you cannot have access to other people out there? Did I not tell you in the past that there's no use for you going to church if you don't have a church right here? Therefore, you take your church to church. And if there's no church in your heart, there's no church in the community out there. Weighed, counted, found wanting. Our meetings and our gatherings have been rendered useless and valueless. For God has not visited those places, but they've been places of constant entertainment where people gather to hear what their itching ears are prepared to hear. Maranatha Masala. Dumelang Bakhayesh. God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. People want to go there and be told things that are soothing. When you tell them stuff that is to do with their own destinies, you're being told, no, Mfundis, you cannot speak like that. Please use polite language. Weighed, counted, found wanting. While the place he was standing on was smelling, he could not help himself but take off his garment that he was putting on and put it on Daniel. Take off the golden chain that was hanging on his neck and put it on Daniel. Remove the ring that was on his hand and put it on Daniel. Backtrack a little bit. While the party was taking place, the Medo-Persians were at the gate. While the United Nations was having function and fun, the enemy was at the gate. While politicians were busy celebrating Viva, 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 Pasi, down with, Aluta. While we're busy celebrating in our corridors of social gatherings, while we're busy shouting, Man United, Kaizer Chiefs, Pirates, Sundowns, we're talking about Porto and etc. The enemy was at the gate. History tells us that they had so much time to divert the river that flowed through Babylon until the water was on the knee level. And the enemy walked in through the walls of the city of Babylon. They occupied the city while the enemy was fast asleep, enjoying and celebrating their own successes. Amazing. Business plans. And it's amazing, particularly in South Africa. We've just finished the State of the Nation address. A few days later, we received the economics and the financial systems of the year. We had plans and plans, billions for this, billions for that, millions for this, millions for that. We're reading the United Nations. We have a target, health for all by 2020, vaccination for all by 2020, poverty alleviation by 2020, 2025, 2030, 2040. All these beautiful plans. We're busy celebrating in our corridors. And while we were celebrating in our corridors, the enemy sneaked in through the wall, burst into the house, into the great hall where the party was taking place, butchering and killing everybody in that house. Good news. The ancient tradition says when you go to war, there's one person you must keep alive, and that is the king. And of course, you do your research before you go for war. Who is the governor? Who is the king who is in power? His name was given as Belshazzar. Belshazzar. And how will we identify him? You'll find him with a crown on his head. You'll find him with a golden chain on his neck. And you'll find him with a golden robe on his body. But remember, Belshazzar, out of desperation, at a moment of sadness and at a moment of catastrophe, he had moved his crown and given it to Daniel. He had moved his chain and given it to Daniel. He had removed his robe and given it to Daniel, removed his signet ring and put it on Daniel. When they walked into the room, what did they find? They found a king. When they asked him, what is your name? Who can doubt it? My name is Belshazzar. The rest of the clothes will tell him who he was. The story ends when the entire house is destroyed and the king is preserved. Have you not noticed how God has a way of preserving his children in the midst of the problems? How God has a way of preparing his children for the days of trouble. This for me is a dry run where we are learning as people who believe that when troubles will finally come, we've been telling you, eat organic foods. Teach your children. Own what you consume. Own your own Christianity. Don't allow the system to own your conscience. Be a man who listens to the voice of God. Place yourself in a place where grace can find you. Now all of a sudden all these things will begin to make sense. But I have good news for someone out there that in the midst of such catastrophe, the preservation of grace cannot be undermined. Daniel is preserved. Daniel is kept well. Daniel is kept safe. Daniel is taken alive and well into the next dispensation. We are facing a catastrophe of magnitude, of global impact. But I want to tell the children of Yahweh who are out there that be of good courage. Do not give up. In the midst of such catastrophe, there will be preservation plan. I just want to pray that you will not be found having been intoxicated by those who were inside the party. You will not find yourself having filled your houses with flags of soccer, with flags of cricket, with flags of worldly celebration. You will not put too much trust into your bank accounts and your PIN numbers. You will not put too much interest in the education and the foolishness of knowledge that you've gathered between your 2 ears. Catastrophe speaks to us that we need to make sure that before the day of final trouble, that we've actually placed ourselves where God and grace can actually assist us. Daniel is taken out of this space and preserved. He is actually promoted to become the next president of the city of Persia. Is that not good news? God will take care of us. God will preserve us. But in the midst of this catastrophe, it is my prayer that let the children of God find themselves secure. Study well, study hard, read the word, place yourself where grace can find you. And when the rest are found in houses of celebration, may you find your shelter in the wings of the Almighty. They trust in horses. They trust in chariots. But I pray that you will trust in the Lord. And after the storm is over, may the children of grace find that they have been protected, even by the enemy who intended to kill them. May the grace of the Lord be upon you all, nations at wide, churches at wide, politicians at wide. Be warned that God is in control and that at the end of it all, we shall come out victorious. May the peace of the Almighty rest upon you all. May He grant you peace of mind and peace in your homes until after the storm.